camera's already on? Let me make myself a bit more presentable. Let's do this. Welcome, dear viewer. Today, we are covering a tale of heroes, people failing to be heroes, of love, of loss, of an affair, and of a giant tentacle squid monster falling out of the sky and attacking New York. Look, if you clicked on this video, odds are you're at least somewhat familiar with the story of Watchmen. But for those of you who aren't, let's give Alcoholic Merlin's magnum opus the respect it deserves. And let's give it a quick summary. We're in a dark reality where the Cold War is worse than ever. The world is on the brink of nuclear Armageddon. Crime is running rampant. And worst of all, Richard Nixon is still president. Our story begins when a mysterious attacker murders Fat Punisher. Crazier Batman takes the case and goes on to warn the gang, including Birdman, Prince Charming, Tobias Funke, and Sylph Spectre. You know, sorry, I couldn't come up with a funny nickname for her. For the record, their names are the Comedian, Rorschach, Night Owl, Ozymandias, Dr. Manhattan, and Sylph Spectre. To put a long story very short, Tobias thinks he causes cancer, so he leaves Earth and loses touch with humanity. An assassin tries taking out Prince Charming, but it turns out Prince Charming is a frickin' ninja, you guys. While Tobias is off-world, Birdman and Sylph Spectre realize that being heroes, it kind of turns them on. So they start having an affair. Crazier Batman gets arrested for murder, which it would totally be out of character. By the way, that's where you get this famous line.
I'm not locked in here with you. You're locked in here with me.
During a prison ride, Birdman and Spectre come to break out Crazier Batman. Then Spectre visits Tobias in space, while Crazier Batman and Birdman keep detecting? They keep trying to figure out who's killing superheroes. Sylph Spectre, up in space with Tobias, she finds out that Fat Punisher assaulted her mother and that he's her biological father. Back down on Earth, Birdman and I think I said it. Crazier Batman? Yeah, Crazier Batman and Birdman are still on the case. And then they finally figure it out. They figure out who's behind it all. And
Surprise,
Prince Charming is behind everything. By the way, he killed Fat Punisher because the dude looked out the window at the wrong time. Gross simplification, but you know, you kind of feel bad for him until you remember the assault. Anyway, where was I? Right. Prince Charming is behind everything. Everyone meets up at the Arctic because, I mean, look at this dude. Of course this man has an Arctic lair. At the base, Prince Charming delivers one of the best lines ever.
You know we can't let you do that.
Do that, Rorschach? I'm not a comic book villain. Do you seriously think I'd explain my masterstroke to you if there were even the slightest possibility you could affect the outcome? I triggered it 35 minutes ago.
And then, Cthulhu arrives, kills millions of New Yorkers, unites the world against him, and Prince Charming wins. Oh, and Tobias totally murders Batman. Still confused? Looks like you should read the book. Now, to shift gears and get a bit away from that pompous line, it should be obvious that Watchmen is a superhero critique. Alan Moore set out to create a world where these sort of broken characters would actually exist. Also, he points out that a real-life Batman would be an antisocial lunatic, and a real-world Superman would probably be aloof, disinterested in humanity. And I think he'd also only wear spandex wherever he goes. What? I meant Speedo, not spandex, but whatever. We'll keep it in. Anyway, so what, I hear many of you ask. So what, it's satirical. Now, as a satirical take, it could be easy to just write off all of them as not truly being heroes, because it's meant to be satire. But I would argue that of the 6 main heroes, at least 2 of them are actually heroes, while at least 3 of the other 4 have some heroic tendencies. Now, where does Rorschach fall? Is he one of the 2 true heroes? One of the 3 with heroic tendencies? Or is he the one who just isn't a hero at all in my mind? Well, I would say maybe he's the hero, but you read the title. So, Rorschach became a vigilante following the Kitty Genovese murder, a real-world tragedy where a 28-year-old woman's murder was witnessed by dozens of bystanders in some form or another, upon which, somehow, none of them acted. While little is known about his earliest days, these aren't the days that Rorschach is being judged on. He's being judged on his actions following the Blair Roche kidnapping and murder. Upon witnessing dogs devouring the bones of the 6-year-old girl, as he puts it, it was Kovacs who closed his eyes. It was Rorschach who opened them again. Therefore, when I'm referring to Rorschach, I'm only referring to the individual born at the moment of where he discovered the bones of Blair Roche. So, I would argue a hero fulfills 6 different categories. 1 would be the outcome of one's actions. By that, I mean if the character succeeds in actually pursuing their heroic goal. So if I want to, for example, free a truckload of children and accidentally get them killed, that's about an F on the heroic scale for the outcome of my actions. The rest of them, thankfully, are pretty self-explanatory. The others are, how selfless is the hero? How empathetic is he? Are his responses proportionate to the crime? So does the punishment fit the crime? What are his motives for being a hero? And what is his morality like? Like, are his morals actually proper? So I would argue Rorschach succeeds in at least 2 to 3 of these. So you have the outcomes of his actions. Rorschach doesn't appear to regularly cause more harm than would have occurred outside of him intervening. By that I mean he doesn't regularly get people killed, it appears like. Now, the selflessness question might be the most difficult to tackle. Here, we get to psychoanalyze him for a little bit, guys. It's because, frankly, selflessness is almost impossible to quantify via a person's actions or via a person's thoughts. Because, frankly, it's easy to do something good for wrong motives, or it's good to believe that you have the right motives but not actually have them. So, one thing that I began asking myself was, I began comparing selflessness to the old saying that one cannot be heroic if one doesn't know fear. So in that way, I will look at it in the way of one can only know selflessness if one knows selfishness to overcome. Now, while he was Walter Kovacs, Rorschach may have very well been incredibly selfless, but frankly, as he put it, Walter Kovacs died. The person he once was no longer exists. And I would argue that because of that, there isn't a selfish part that he needs to overcome. In the sense that he believes that what he does is selfless. And so it would be another question entirely to analyze if he's actually having the intended effect. Now, regardless of any empathy he may have had at the beginning of his time as a hero, I would again argue empathy belonged to Walter Kovacs. It does not belong to Rorschach. The only time that we see him empathetic is after he hears about how the comedian sexually assaulted the original Silver Spectre. Upon hearing this, he is empathetic for the comedian, the man who had sexually assaulted another woman. That is who Rorschach had empathy towards. Do I really need to cover this section? I mean, he's absurdly violent. And while I could go through his excessive brutality in interrogations, I think the best example is good old Captain Carnage. If you remember at the end of the first issue, Silver Spectre and Night Owl reminisce about Captain Carnage, a goofy person who presented themselves as a supervillain because they liked getting beat up. So, why am I mentioning this? Because when he wanted Walter Kovacs or Rorschach to beat him up, Rorschach just dropped him down an elevator shaft. To our knowledge, the only thing that he did wrong was that he wanted attention from superheroes. Now, while the motives that Walter Kovacs once held may have been pure, I again have to go with the cop-out answer that I believe the pure motives, if they existed, I believe they belong more to Walter Kovacs, except for the final scene. I believe when Rorschach leaves the Arctic base and intends to inform the public that the giant Cthulhu monster was actually Veidt's doing, or Ozymandias' doing, I believe in that moment, Rorschach truly believed that what he was doing was good. Now, when it comes to morality, this is where I have my biggest issues with Rorschach. Rorschach projects sexism towards women because of his horrendous relationship with his mother. His worldview is so black and white that he refers to everyone as filth, though many are likely at least moderately good people. I mean, one of his biggest issues with people is that he thinks they're too in tune with their sexuality. And the only person whose moral character that Kovacs defends at any point is the comedian, a literal rapist. Oh, and I forgot. He breaks a random person's fingers because someone in the bar might know a piece of information. And he chooses this person because they made an off comment that he didn't smell very good. Now, from the tirade you just sat through, there are two things you likely assume about me. I consider Rorschach irredeemably unheroic, and I'm not nearly as funny as I think I am. I can tell you for sure, you are wrong about one of those. I don't personally find Rorschach to be irredeemably evil. That's one of the most fascinating things about how Alan Moore created his world. Rorschach, despite his many, many, many flaws, still attempts to do what is right. He has such convictions in his beliefs of what is right and wrong that he died rather than keep the secret of what Ozymandias did. And even though I mentioned earlier that I believe Walter Kovacs and Rorschach to be separate entities, I believe a piece of Walter Kovacs is still alive within him. And Walter Kovacs was at least empathetic enough that seeing Blair Roche's bones eaten by the dogs shattered his psyche. irreparably. Ultimately, the story of Rorschach is the story of a broken man who may have once been a hero, but his experience caused him to lose his way. Despite him having lost his way, however, this man still seeks to do what is right. So, is he a hero? Is he not? I would say, while he isn't a hero, he does still have heroic tendencies. I believe that Walter Kovacs may very well have been a hero, but frankly, we don't know enough about him for me to say that for her either. But ultimately, Rorschach winds up in this gray area where he isn't a true hero, but he does have some heroic bones within him.